Welcome back. We are now moving on to chapter 18, and we're going to break it up in three parts. So this first one's going to talk about the different types of reproduction. I kind of introduced some of them when I was talking about the different types of animals, especially when it comes to plants and stuff, but we're going to go in a little bit more detail about them, and there's a lot of cool videos that I put in with this section, so do go watch them. There's really cool ones out there, and like I said, this is what I did my degree in, my PhD, so I will, especially when we get to spermatogenesis, keep it super simple. I don't want to go into boring details about it because trust me, I can put you to sleep with a lot of excess stuff. So let's get moving. So I've mentioned the difference between asexual and sexual reproduction. Now, asexual reproduction is where you're making clones of yourself, and it's going to match exactly to the parental generation. Sexual reproduction is where we're taking a combination of genetic material from different parents and creating a genetically unique offspring. Now, asexual, just like if you put an organism in a copy machine and push go. Sexual is where we have the egg and the sperm come together. Combination of the chromosomes from both parents, we now have a unique offspring, not genetically identical to the parents. Now, there are pros and cons to each of them. Depending on what the organism is, the environment, all the other stuff might be why they use a certain way. Now, for asexual, you can get a large number produced at once. Remember, bacteria, prokaryotes, they use this, and some eukaryotes do too. You can get a large number. It's very quick. If the environment is favorable, all the offspring are going to survive because they're all genetically identical. So bacteria resistance is a key things right here. So once one kind of bacteria figures out, hey, I have the resistance to antibiotic, boom, I'm going to divide now. Those have resistance. So it's easy to spread and all of them will survive. The cons, well, if your environment changes drastically, everyone will be wiped out because you're not able to adapt as fast. Now, sexual reproduction, you can acquire fitness for that changing environment because you might get some qualities with that combination of genes. Now, the cons is you got to have maintain two sexes, so you're going to have overall lower numbers because only half the sexes can actually produce offspring. And you have to go through the process of producing the gametes, so it takes a little bit longer compared to asexual reproduction. So let's talk about some of the different types of asexual first. So one of them was fission, and that's another way it's called binary fission. So basically the cell's just splitting into two parts and it's going to regenerate the necessary missing parts of an organism. You're going to see this happen a lot in prokaryotic organisms and some invertebrates, and a few multi-celled organisms will actually go through this part here too. There's a cool video. This one is about flatworm, where you can actually cut it into different pieces and the different regions will actually regenerate into totally new organisms. So that's what that video is really cool. But you can see this little video right here. He's kind of going through the process of copying. Eventually, they're going to split into two exact organisms. Now, budding, this is a little hydra right here. This is where you just have an outgrowth part of the body. And eventually it's going to lead to separation. From the bud, it's going to separate from the original. This organism is going to be smaller than the parental one. And you'll see this common in some invertebrates. Corals and hydras are there. This is an example of a video of this going on live. It's really cool. Now, fragmentation. Oh, this is really, I think some of these things are really interesting. So this is where you're going to break off an individual into parts, and it's going to actually go through and regenerate the parts that's missing. Starfish is a prime example, and that's this video is going to talk about, you know, when you chop off a leg of a sea star, how it kind of go through and can build back, and how these different ones can actually go and form their own organisms. So it's kind of funny because sometimes you might have like a population of sea stars that might be causing damage on there, and the way they think to get rid of them is to chop them into pieces. Well, chopping into pieces is just making more of them because now each piece can actually go make its own organism. So kind of cool. Watch this video. It talks about sea stars. It's only like 2 minutes, but it's really cool. I say that a lot. I think everything's cool. Biology's awesome. Now, parthenogenesis. So if you took 1408 with me and we had to do the virtual lab where you watched a little video of the small world microscope, and then it was that little Daphne water fleet giving birth to twins. Parthenogenesis is kind of cool. You might have seen this video. I might have put it in a previous lecture, but this is talking about a female whale shark that gave birth, and she hasn't been around a male in a long time. So what's happening is you're going to have an egg develop into an individual without being fertilized. She does not need a man. Now, sometimes this happens quite often. Bees, their males are actually haploids, so all the joins, and the diploid females are going to be the females are going to be the workers and the queen. Some invertebrates do that. Happy little water fleas, rotifers, aphids, some stick insects, and like other insects actually go through this process too. As I mentioned, this happens in some vertebrates. Certain reptiles, amphibians, and fish actually go through the process of parthenogenesis. So this video talks about it a little bit more. I think it's cool. It's one of those discovery ones. I know I've said cool like 50 times, but really, I think reproduction is awesome. Now, sexual reproduction, remember, this is where we're taking a combination. It's usually going to be haploid from 2 reproductive cells, and you're going to form a third diploid organism that's going to be unique. Now, depending on the type of organism, and we saw this throughout the different types of the classification of the animal kingdom, you might have 2 separate sexes in species. Sometimes an organism might be a hermaphrodite, where it has both the male and female reproductive systems. Now, these hermaphrodites can actually go through self-fertilization, or it can actually mate within the species. Now, self-fertilization can be bad because it can lead to inbreeding if we're only focusing on that. So sex determination, I wanted to mention this a little bit when we talked about with genetics and sex-linked genes. I might have mentioned it a little bit, but determining if you're going to be male or female, especially in a lot of mammals, it's a combination of your X and Y chromosomes. So for females, we have 2 X's, and males are XY. Mammals, some insects, and some plants actually go and use this process. Now, some other different animals use what we call the Z and W chromosome determination. Basically, it's like flipped. Males have 2 the same chromosome, females have 2 different ones. Birds, some fish, crustaceans, insects, some reptiles do that. What's interesting is sometimes environment can override whatever sex chromosomes have. So temperature has been shown to help determine sex. This has been shown in some alligators and turtles. So during the middle third of egg development, depending on this little turtle nest right here, it's a cute little cartoon. You can look for the source on the last page, but you have the eggs. So depending on where they are located in this hole will determine if they're going to be male or female or a mixture. So the males, they like the cooler area right here. So these eggs will primarily develop as males. The girls like it warmer. They'll be primarily atop. And in the middle, it's just 50-50 what you're going to get. Now, what's also interesting is some animals can actually change their sex throughout their life. This is a little video that talks about clownfish and how they can do that in this group that studies it. It's just fascinating. Now, this does happen quite often. The term intersex, this is where you're born with any of several variations of the sex characteristics. It can include your chromosomes, gonads, sex hormones, and genitals. As I mentioned, there are plenty of options that can happen with the sex chromosomes thanks to how things are crossing over in meiosis. Now, when they are born, the babies might have ambiguous reproductive organs. They might have a combination. This is quite a controversial topic. This is a link to the page where it talks about pretty much what intersex means. And I like this video. We watched it in class. It's a little bit older, but it comes with that condition. If you think as a parent, how would you go through and approach this? Because if your child is born intersex, how do you make the decision of which gender you're going to go down? It's actually a committee that's brought together to go through and decide, but what happens if you make that decision and it was the wrong one? And I like this because it's a really interesting topic, and like it can be quite controversial, so please watch that. It'll kind of make you think that, wow, like I hope I would never have to make that decision, but it makes you think that, you know, this does happen quite often. So I've mentioned this before, but if you are going through the process of fertilization, it will be either external or internal, and it's pretty much all about environment. So fertilization is just diffusion of the egg and sperm. It's going to be external, and normally if they're found in aquatic environments. And the process they do that is the process called spawning. So basically, in this aquatic environment, all the egg and sperm are all released at the same time. These can be released by triggers, chemicals, daylight, all kinds of different things could trigger this. A lot of aquatic ones, like I said, your fish, crustaceans, mollusks, frogs, echinoderms, they do this. Now, the reason they do this, they want to make sure the eggs don't dry out, but they pretty much broadcast spawn. So it's just a big old release of egg and sperm, and we're just hoping that, they come together. Now, the one thing to note is the survival rate of the eggs produced this way is actually very low. Versus internal. So once we start to move to land, we kind of move to internal fertilization. Some aquatic species do this, and I've mentioned these 3 terms before, but here's a little bit more information. So you can be where it's oviparity. So this is where the fertilized eggs are laid outside the female's body and they develop there. So inside the egg, they're going to receive nourishment from the yolk. Bony fish do this, many reptiles, some amphibians. And there are also the 2 mammals, and all birds go through this process. Now, ovoviparity is where the fertilized eggs remain inside the female, but the embryo obtains nourishment from the egg's yolk. And they're fully developed when they are hatched. So some fish do this, sharks. I've seen this horrible video where these sharks did it, and when they hatch early, they actually eat the other shark eggs that are developing. This is stuff that gives you nightmares. Now, viparity is where the young develops within the female, receiving nourishment from the placenta. Offspring are born alive. So this is where the mammals, some fish, and some reptiles actually go through this process. So here are some review and cool, fun videos. I said reproduction is actually kind of fun to talk about, and you'll see that when we get to development too. And here are credit for the images.